It hits like a shock in the middle of a good moment, just when the Bears finally look like a serious NFC player. The future of one of the faces of this defense is being pushed right back onto the table, and the words, long-term and out of Chicago, start to show up in the same scent as his name. This is Bears News Fan Report, and I'm here with you as always, as a Bears fan first and a host second, to bring you the latest updates and real rumors around our team. With that mix of honest numbers, locker room context, and emotion that only someone who lives this franchise every week can give you. In this video, I'm going to break down where things really stand with Jaylon Johnson, why his situation has become one of the most sensitive topics inside Halas Hall, what his contract and availability mean for the front office, and how a decision on him could reshape both our secondary and our long-term plan on defense. So stay with me until the end because there's a lot more here than just keep or trade, and it all ties directly into what kind of Bears team we want to see in the next few years. The crazy part is that this conversation is happening during a stretch when the Bears are actually winning football games. After stumbling early, this team has pulled itself together, taking 4 of the last 5 and moving up in the second place in the division, right back into the playoff picture and turning national heads that had already written us off. The pass rush is flashing more often, the offense is finally giving us some real drives, the locker room has juice again, and all of that is happening while one of our top defensive players has basically been a ghost this season. Jaylon has suited up in just one game, back in Week 2 against Detroit, and since then, the Bears have been forced to survive without him on the field, patching together a secondary with whoever was healthy, mixing in guys who were supposed to be depth pieces, and asking them to hold up while the team tried to build momentum. When you watch the tape, you can feel his absence. There are snaps where a veteran corner with Jaylon's instincts probably steals a route, squeezes a throwing window, or simply takes away the opponent's number 1 read, and yet somehow this defense still found a way to be good enough in big spots. That's where the tension starts. On one side, you've got his resume, a top-end cover corner when healthy, a player who has already proven he can lock down entire halves of the field and go toe-to-toe with some of the better receivers in the league. A guy the front office committed to with a 4-year, big money extension in 2024 because they believed he could be a pillar of this new era. On the other side, you have the reality of this season, a big chunk of cap space tied up in a player who has barely played, a defense that has been forced to grow without him, and a coaching staff that has discovered more depth in the secondary than most people thought existed. In that vacuum, his name has quietly slid to the top of trade candidate lists around the league. Analysts look at Chicago and say, if they want to create flexibility and add assets, this is the piece that moves the needle. Jaylon's value is still high because when he's on the field, the tape shows a difference maker, physical at the line, smart with his leverage, comfortable in both man and zone, and capable of playing that CB1 role in a modern NFL defense that lives in nickel and dime most of the game. But the whispers you hear now are not just about his talent. They're about timing, money, and risk. That contract he signed last year was a statement that the Bears wanted to lock in one of the best young corners in football. A 4-year, $70+ million commitment that said, we found our guy and we're building around him. Trading him just one season later would be a complete pivot. A signal that the front office is willing to separate emotion from cold calculations and use one of its biggest defensive investments as a way to reload. It sounds brutal, but that's how serious teams think in a league with a hard cap and short windows. The front office has to ask itself some uncomfortable questions. Can they rely on Jaylon to stay healthy over the next few years when expectations and stakes will be even higher? Is it smarter to hold on to him and hope this year is a blip or to move now, while his age and past production can still bring back a real haul in picks and maybe a player? All of that is happening while the Bears are finally competitive again, which makes the decision even harder because parting ways with a star defender in the middle of a playoff push would hit the locker room straight in the heart. At the same time, think about the bigger picture. If you're Ryan Poles and the staff, you know the roster still has holes. The pass rush, even with improvement, needs more blue-chip talent. The offensive line can always use reinforcement. You've got young defenders like Kyler Gordon and others in the secondary who have been forced to grow up fast, gaining reps and confidence while Jaylon has been out. That depth performing better than expected gives the Bears something dangerous. The ability to even consider moving on from a star at a premium position and not instantly falling off a cliff. That's why his name appears in those national breakdowns of all-season trade candidates. It's not about disrespect. It's about leverage. The Bears have a corner under contract at a high number with Pro Bowl level potential, whose absence this year has forced them to find ways to play decent defense anyway. For other teams, especially those a corner away from fixing their pass defense, that's exciting. For Chicago, it's a fork in the road. There's also the twist that nobody can ignore. This entire conversation would look different if Jalen came back late in the season, stayed healthy, and played at his usual level. A strong return down the stretch could boost the Bears' chances in a playoff push and at the same time remind everyone exactly why the front office paid him in the first place. In that scenario, you're no longer talking about an overpriced, injured asset. You're talking about a cornerstone who just had a rough year physically and is ready to dominate again. Suddenly, the idea of trading him becomes a lot harder to sell to a fan base and a locker room that sees him as a leader. But if the health questions linger, or if the staff genuinely believes the scheme and the depth they've developed can survive without him, suddenly the idea of flipping Jalen Johnson for premium picks becomes less insane and more like a calculated, forward-looking play. And here's where the reality of the modern NFL kicks in. Even in the middle of a winning stretch, successful teams never stop thinking one step ahead. The Bears' surge into the playoff mix doesn't erase the need to build a sustainable contender. It just means that every move has to serve two masters at once, help you today and not kill you tomorrow. Moving on from a top corner will create a short-term hole, but it could also give you the resources to strengthen multiple spots and lock up other young pieces long-term. Keeping him gives you stability at a crucial position, but it also ties up a chunk of money you can't use elsewhere and doubles down on a player whose availability just burned you for almost an entire season. That's the tug-of-war happening behind the scenes. As a fan, I feel it both ways. I've seen games where Jalen erases one side of the field, and you walk away saying, that's what a number one corner looks like. I've also watched this year's group scrap and fight without him, showing a kind of collective toughness that makes you believe in the room more than any individual name. My honest read right now is that all signs point toward the Bears at least listening very seriously to offers. When your name shows up on multiple trade boards, when analysts repeatedly mention you as a possible centerpiece in off-season talks, and when your contract is big enough to change the math for an entire defensive unit, it's not random. We may not see anything during the season itself, but the idea that Jalen Johnson plays out this whole deal in Chicago feels a lot less certain than it did when he signed it. If the right package appears, high draft capital, maybe a young player on a cheaper deal, the Bears might decide that this is exactly the moment to cash in and retool a defense that is already learning how to win without him. At the same time, the staff and the front office are not blind to what he brings when he's on the field. And that's why this is so delicate. You're not talking about an overhyped name. You're talking about one of the best players on the roster when everything is working. That's why, for me, the most realistic outcome is this. As we move through this playoff chase and into the offseason, we're gradually walking toward a point where Jalen Johnson being out of the Bears' long-term picture is on the table for real. It doesn't mean a trade is guaranteed. It doesn't mean the relationship is broken. But it does mean that what once felt like a locked-in marriage now looks more like a business partnership. That could end if the numbers and the timing line up for both sides. Before I wrap up, I want to hear from you, because this hits every Bears fan differently. Would you trade Jalen Johnson if it meant adding serious draft capital and freeing up money to fix other spots? Or do you believe you simply don't let prime-age corners walk out of Chicago under any circumstances? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me how you'd handle the situation if you were sitting in that front office. And don't be shy. This is exactly the kind of debate that defines what kind of team we want to be. To close this out in one clear line, Jalen Johnson's situation has gone from franchise cornerstone to high-value trade piece, and whether he ends up out of the Bears or not will tell us everything about how aggressive this front office is willing to be in balancing a real playoff push with a long-term vision for this defense. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to keep getting fast updates and deep analysis on every move, rumor, and decision around our Chicago Bears, make sure you subscribe to Bears News Fan Report. Hit like, share this video with another fan who needs to be in this conversation. And turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the twists still to come in this Jalen Johnson saga and beyond.